свою работу, не докинул информацию, и вы должны это все делать сами. То есть чем это грозит для вас?
So the threat to you is that you will have to spend time to understand what the task is about, and you will understand what the situation is in the team. So it means the team is not working in a synchronized mode. Some people may not just understand what you're doing about what you do and why you're being given different tasks. Customer loyalty may go down because while you're thinking and wasting time on learning what really is needed, you are not able to check some critical features. That's why you could miss something essential. If such situations happen on a regular basis, they may happen again and again, and other specialists will come across such situations. There'll be no regular work. Oh, there's something wrong with the presentation. The slides are a little bit lost. So it's going to be even more complicated, but let's try to move forward. If this happens, you should do the following. To get rid of all these problem tasks, you have to send them as the feedback to your PM and ask him to give more detailed description. Because the project manager must be aware what task he should give you, and you have to provide him with the checklist, and other people will understand that this kind of testing requires certain incoming documentation. If somebody asks you to do a load testing, you have to understand what survey you're going to use for that, which parameters it should have, what are the applicable parameters in terms of load. All such things have to be covered and written down in your task. The advantages of such an approach are as follows. If your task is well structured and complete, you won't have to spend time on clarifying. Somebody may check after you. Managers will understand what you want from them and how you both work together. One more aspect is that new features are much easier to perceive than some technical obligations. Sometimes team asks you to do a task, for example, to rewrite a template, to add a light to a button or something of the kind. At the same time, you know that a code is not documented or has not yet been tested, and you would like to work with this code, but the priorities are assigned in such a way that you have to do something completely different, some completely different tasks. It threatens their functionality release, because sometimes a user may not even find certain parameter and you are aware of this but not able to test it properly. And even if you know that such a parameter, such problem may appear later, you're not able to do the tests because you're given other tasks. In the end, if a user finds this functionality which is not operational despite your application being such a nice, you will be asked why you missed this bug. What could be done in such a situation? In such a case, you have to discuss with your project manager what tasks and priorities have to be put. You have to discuss risks on functionality with the project manager, and you would like to work with the bugs and tasks on the functionality right at this very moment, not to postpone it for later when you're doing the design or implementation. An advantage of such an approach is that you and your team both take part in setting up the content of a sprint, selecting the tasks to do. And users become even happy because even if the design is not rewritten, it is still okay. One of the disadvantages is that a customer might have expected certain change or something completely redesigned. But if you are only doing tasks critical for you, leaving out behind the expectations of the customer, you might lose his loyalty. Sometimes it's very difficult to persuade the customer that this or that should be done, and the customer may say that I can sacrifice functionality for the sake of having something beautiful. Of course, it is a wish of the customer, but we also have to ensure that we manage our risks, and we should be aware that some features may not be working. In this particular case, we need to explain that redesign really makes sense, that there are certain metrics that confirm this necessity of redesigning or rewriting. Sometimes a conflict with the manager may happen when responsibility areas cross. It's when there is no clearing up the bugs, there is no clearance for tasks. You may have a huge backlog, you may have a huge amount of tasks that have to be added on your sprint, but still this doesn't happen. You can feel that you're really tired, you have a lot of things to do, and you have to sort out the results. And if you have to do such an extensive verification, it requires a lot of concentration and efforts from your side and gets your work really tough. Such things should be and must be and could be discussed with your management. When you feel that you are not able to complete the resolve and you are not able to focus your attention on bug fixing, and it will be really time consuming, and you don't have time for any other activities, discuss it with your project manager. A solution to such a situation is that you could talk to the project manager, have a meeting on a weekly basis, or have meetings every second week to discuss together all their things happening in your project, where you would be able to analyze the resolve, sort out the tasks, and prioritize the tasks for your sprint, and then start solving the tasks jointly with your team. The advantage of such an approach is that you will have more time. Your tasks to do verification will be split into smaller ones, requiring shorter time frames for the implementation. It would be easier for you to check the status of your test tracker and its relevance, and it's part of the tester's responsibility. Well, our presentation is getting better and better. Now it's time to talk about the customer. As you see on the picture in the slide, it's the portrait of Stalin, and he looks very concentrated. I've never had such presentations before, actually. See, sometimes it happens that the customer is not happy, like in this slide, and I've been in a situation when a customer comes to you and tells you, hey guys, I really want you to use paper-based checklists. Let's print out everything that you have, and you will check, put marks with the pen, and then show everything to me, show how it all works. You are telling your customer, oh, we would like to use the dedicated tools for this, and this is my area of responsibility. Then the threat here is quite direct for the whole testers team. Firstly, the approach of work is very inconvenient for the testers. Somebody is telling you what to do, while the other team members are not having such directive orders. If you are compromising with the customer too often, then you will have to continue and you will have to make favors to your customers in future. Then the customer may have or already has such a test scenario, and you will be responsible then for such a test scenario. In order to avoid such situations in future, you have to tell your customer about the tools from start. You have to sell your tools, telling him that you are using API testing, you are using Postman for the API testing, and you can explain to your customer that before we use that or after we use that, showing what was before and what happened after. Like the testers are happy, the analysts are happy, and it's much more convenient for them. The same is true about other tools, such as tools for developing the documentation. It is evident that paper-based checklist is not a solution. Since you are not able to make iterations, you are not able to collect and process statistical data, you are not able to make new versions. That's why please tell your customer directly that this is not the way you work, you are not able to do this and you would like to use some other tools. Protect yourself in front of your customer. Tell the customers that you are a specialist, that you are selecting the tools which you are going to use. There are advantages of this approach because first, you limit the areas of responsibility. You tell your customer that you are going to select tools independently. You don't need any help from the outside. Let me ask you a question. How often did you hear something of the kind, oh guys, this has been the case. It's been historically like this. So a disadvantage is that this has always been like this. For instance, a bank app which has certain security requirements, like we're not going to display anything on the internet, we're not going to share anything, let's use paper-based copies. No, it's not the way. The situation when there are 7 Fridays in a row during the week. Sometimes the customer adds tasks to your sprint and the scope of the sprint extends immensely, and you feel that first you wanted to test certain scope of works, you made a plan, you had man hours, and all of a sudden you'd get more and more tasks and you have to stay until late in the night and test everything. So your sprint enlarges, the number of tasks increases, however your time doesn't. Then you're just faced with the overtime and you're personally really tired, which is bad. Your attention is being distracted. You jump from one task to another task and your work becomes less efficient. But then you feel that you are not able even to test everything, and the risk of taking responsibility for a failure grows. In such cases, you have to talk to the customer, and you can agree with the customer on the scope and on additional works that you can take in your scope, but that number should not exceed 3 or 4 tasks or 3 or 4 bugs per each particular sprint. This will give you a possibility to somehow limit the extension of the scope of works. Such workload is acceptable. You can live with this, you can work with this. Also, you can talk to your manager and to your customer about the test plan. First, you prepare the test plan and explain them what tasks you were planning to perform during this particular week. You can propose to take away certain functionality from the test plan, not to test functionalities, and include the functions which you would like to test. If it works, you are only making your management familiar with what you do. If it doesn't work that way, then you can add to your test plan something that you are going to do through a reduced version of the checklist. And in your test report, when writing down the risks, please add just that, okay, there were too many tasks. I worked up to my limit and I feel that there will be many bugs. An advantage of such an approach to work is that you inform the decision-making persons of the potential risks. If you manage to find an agreement, then everything works quite well and looks quite well. If you are too tough, you may lose customer loyalty. Or a customer can add his favorite point from the agile manifestation is that the readiness for change is much more important than anything else. So, hey guy, have one more task on your sprint.
So the next point with the customers is that it's even worse. We don't have analytic in the project, nobody. And you have to organize them by yourself. So you can get some ready-made products, then you have to test it, and you can be guided only by intuition, trying to understand how it works. In my practice, we could understand this only together with the customer and provide some checklists to him, and he said, no, it doesn't work like this, it's different, I didn't tell you like that, so it works in a different way. And we made these conference calls, and every time he provided different descriptions of how this application should work. So, and I had to collect all these requirements myself practically. They changed dynamically from Skype call to Skype call. It was unclear where we have change requests and where it is legal, and so we needed to make some changes to the existing product. So it was very difficult, very complex, and very bad. So correspondingly, how did we manage to resolve this task? How did we settle it? We just hired an analytic. So this is just one of the options how we can do it. So if you feel that it's not your work, then, well, you don't have to collect the requirements to make these follow-ups, etc. So we hired an analytic. Another option, if you cannot hire an analytic, or there is another problem with hiring him, not only budget but something else, then you have to send these requests to all the team members so that the team members know that, so that these are the requirements that we have at least managed to collect. We have shown them to the customer, and if something happens, then the customer will look at these requirements provided by himself, and you can prove that you were right. So what are the pros of this approach? So you have your back protected, so you can just show him something that he has told you, and we are working according to your plan. So cons are probably almost no cons, only two disadvantages. First, that you are not able to hire an analytic because of financial problems or else, and you will have to collect it yourself. So the next manager. So here there should be an analyst, and well, actually, sometimes an analyst asks, how should it work? Let's think about it a little more elaborated. So our task of testing is that you have to be able to tell how the product works at some point of time and what exactly fails at some particular point of time. Normally, analysts are responsible for that. How normally it looks like in general? So let's imagine that you have some mobile application and it has some middleware which addresses some integration services, and these integration services contain some documentation, some manuals, and you probably had some opportunity to read it a little and analytics, and then you can do it again and collect the fields, and which has to be collected from the integrators to the middle ones and then sent to the cloud.
Прибегает к вам и спрашивает, а как это должно работать? Ну, ты же смотрел, как это вот, а это...
And so you feel that, for example, you sit there, you work, you have something else to do, but then you have together with the analyst actually do his job for him, sitting with him and discuss it. Same refers to an even more strange thing when, for example, there are two analysts at the project. One was responsible for the requirements and he processed them in his own way, and the other he, for example, doesn't understand at all what is there in the requirements. They're confused, and at the end of the day they start asking you, distracting you from your main job. And what is the risk of this situation? You explain how it should normally work. You should do it, not analysts should tell you what is the expected result of the product. You start reading the manuals, looking for various fields, trying to systematize it, bring it to some order, doing the job of an analyst. And you understand that as the owner does not understand the requirements himself, something is going wrong, and we have to do something about that. And it's obvious when this is doing a survey. This is a very strange format when the analyst cannot actually understand what you explain. You're speaking different language. So what can we do in this case? You can, together with the analyst, sit together at a desk, and he will sketch some business requirements, some list of fields, so that you can check it, extract all the data, and he, the analyst, will use this data to compile some requirements based on that. That's actually how it happens in our company. So there should be some specific reporting, some specific format between you two, so that you can use the results of the reports and develop requirements based on that. You can make also a review of the requirements, and also you can use some special standard for the requirements development. The advantage of this approach is that you won't need to answer the questions how should it work, because you will have the common context with the analytics, because you've worked together, you've made some common conclusions, so you have the same view on the requirements, on the products, and correspondingly, if you develop some standard for the requirements, you can then import it into other projects of your company, and correspondingly, if you hire new analysts and they try to change something in these requirements, they can be referred to some template, explain that please do it like that, it's nice, it's working, let's leave it like that. The disadvantage is that probably you won't have time to establish this cooperation. The developers. So the developers, the situation with them is that sometimes they just forget about producing versions. how it looks. For example, in web, something can fail without versions. So the bug, whether it was fixed or not, it's not clear. So the object versioning is not used, and in Jira, for example, some version cannot be installed, but the other version is fixed already, and you don't know which version is fixed or not, and you become a release editor. You have to register the versions that were fixed, those that were not, but it's very difficult not to make a mistake, and it's very difficult to find in which version the bug was fixed. You have to contact developers, ask them. It's not a good situation. And finally, you can encounter some bugs which are not existent in this compilation, and this is just a waste of time because you try to fix a bug which is not there. So how can we change that? Well, actually we can use some standards. You can discuss with the developer and decide that these bugs can be, well, sent to him with a feedback. Also, you can also say that I won't check this kind of material. It improves the discipline, and developers become doing something on their own, independently. And actually in our team, and not only in our team, there is a practice that when compilation is made, then some push notifications comes to some messenger describing this compilation, like including the description of the team, listing the team members, bugs fixed, etc. So also, what are the advantages of that? So the advantage is that you always know what is fixed in which compilation, and the disadvantage is that developers can start asking you, okay, why don't you put your label in Jira? It's not so difficult. Well, the next situation is bug tracker in messages when pro bugs, pro tasks. So people start writing you to direct or common chats, and then because of the flood of the group, these messages go up and you forget about them. It's difficult to find them, and it's even worse when the bugs finally get to the prod, although they've been discussed, detected, and normally the risk is that special instruments are not used, the information is lost, and also there are some losses in the metrics. So to improve that, we can use hashtags in messages to look for these messages in messages, or you can check the messages, the common chat in messages of your team, so that you know for sure that everything that's been detected was fixed. Also, you can include that all in the Jira, lose less, reduce risks. Next problem is that the problem of delivery of compilation into the test. When somebody joins the project, he thinks that you're waiting for the build, nothing comes, and finally when you get the build you have to sit 24/7 to test it. You don't have enough time. The deadline is not met, and at last you are asked how much left, please do it faster, why are you so slow, and what are the rescue ways. You can inform PM about that, say that the bug somewhere between you and developer. You can also make compilation by yourself through the system of continuous integration. You can also make some development plans at hand. when you want to make a build, you can read something on the automation. Also, you can make a report for some specific risks. So say that you've been just waiting, nothing came. Like I've been waiting for the build, it was not delivered. That's why I had to spend more time than expected. Well, of course, I couldn't describe all the possible situations, all the possible cases that might occur. That's not all encompassing. But if we make a summary, so you have to make formats of tasks, of bugs registration, so that you know, that your team knows how it gets this data. It makes your work easier. And this is the standards of the service, checklists listing the activities, what exactly do you need for the input, for the account manager, for the PM, so that they also understand what kind of activities they can expect. Because normally testing is something like unicorn. Nobody knows how it is, what it is. And so also we need standards of test plans and also good standards for reports, so that in the field called risks you can state everything, list everything that might fail, so that your managers know how to deal with that and whether it's worth releasing this product to the products in general, or maybe you have to wait and look for something better, for some opportunity to do it in a better way. Something went wrong. Thank you for the presentation, but what shall we do if there is a senior tester in a team who hired junior tester, and then this senior left the company and the junior was delegated all the powers of the senior tester, and it's much more than junior can actually deal with. So, because earlier it was okay. So, can you make it shorter? I don't understand your question. So, how to, if the tasks of the senior drop on the junior, it's good for the senior. And what junior can do in this situation? Well, I don't know. Be it me, I would do something like that. For example, how I would deal with that. Sometimes I really, being a junior, faced very complex tasks, and I just had to deal with that. And I Googled it, and it was some kind of training as well. At least I perceived it like that, so it was my experience. So thank you for the presentation. So when I was guessing, I put cross here, and if my customer doesn't read my messages, I know the answer. We have a customer who never reads our messages. What we do in our contract, it's a secret actually, but I tell you. In the contract, we included a paragraph that if we don't receive an answer within 3 days to our message, we consider this our proposal or comment to be approved by him. Thank you. Our question. So, is that why do you talk about analytics about analysts, how should they work, because he has to anyway go to product owner and get final answer from the developer, because in the code it should be stated how it should work. You can just get logic from there. You shouldn't analyze anything, because if product owner tells me that, or the developer can tell me that, not an analyst. And you say that versioning is abandoned. No, I don't know about that. I can't tell you about that. But answer to the first question is that there is no dedicated product owner who would sit and just collect all the requests from the customer, having the final picture in his head. It can happen in small projects where some people might be absent. But the second question, well, I was based on the example when we deal with somebody else's IP, and the situation with an IP gets to the testing. It's not about the developers. It's not a question to a developer. I remember the developers who delivered this documentation to us, it was not done well enough, and also when we tried, they interrupted us and told that we cannot work with that, we have other tasks, and we had to process it ourselves. We had to write a lot of messages, and we never got any replies to those. That's when we used this paragraph that the message not replied within 3 days is considered to be approved. But yeah, that happens. That's a bad situation, but well. Sometimes you cannot influence everything in your work, so you just have to put up with it. My question is that, well, actually, during your presentation, I thought that it looks like you are rendering only testing services, and your testers are unicorns who are responsible for everything. But then, when you talked about analysts, it's a responsible secretary who has to record the minutes, everything you say. Well, yeah, sometimes freshman joins the team, he doesn't understand anything, and sometimes I had to write some small scripts before making these queries in semi-automatic mode, so that people, freshmen, could learn how to do it, and then they could extend that, develop it. But my question is that this responsibility issue was quite interesting, because the scope of responsibility is like unlimited. Well, we are all responsible for the quality. We are all responsible for tuning the processes as needed. But the point is that you are sitting at a meeting, and all the boundaries are violated, exceeded, and nobody says, okay, let's stop that. No, they're sitting there, they're joking, making fun, they don't work, but just making the meeting. That's how it works, and sometimes you have to tune the processes. You have to just tell them, it's time. So now we have to finish, so this is the last question. Thank you for your presentation. So you said that you collected requirements instead of the analysts. You just had no analyst at that time. So my question is that how did developers actually worked? What were they based on? They were like gods. No, actually we got ready project, and they had some kind of documentation, but they just received it like that. Thank you for your tolerance, and please choose the best question. I think the best one, and this is this young man, and he receives the t-shirt, the one who thinks that everything is so bad.